Welcome to Soul Sense Podcast at Samaritan's Well Counseling here in Richardson. And I actually have a fellow counselor from Richardson. Rebecca, welcome to the Soul Sense Podcast.
Thank you. It is good to be here. I really appreciate you guys reaching out.
So glad to have you. Rebecca has a new book coming out, hopefully by September. It's called Healing Time, Move into a Future of Freedom and Flow. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the book before we start talking about your work with clients.
Sure. And there's definitely an overlap for sure. To start, I've always wanted to write a book. And my dad's side of the family, both grandparents have written things, books and articles and books and small short stories. My dad is writing a book. My brother and my sister are all writing a book. So it's definitely already kind of like in that thought process of growing up. And so I had written on, a piece of paper, different ideas that I had of like, oh, I think that'd be cool to write about, or that'd be cool to have a book about. So that inspired it. And then I've been interested in the concept of time, like movies, TV shows for as long as I can remember. And like it could be like, alternate timelines, or like going backwards in time or future in time. So that inspired it, as well as the work with my clients, and seeing in the work that they did in healing, that they changed their timelines essentially. Because if they hadn't have changed their beliefs and what they were experiencing, then their future would look very different. But because of them doing the work that they did, that they were able to change what their future looked like. And so it's just been really neat to see and experience that with myself personally, in being in counseling, because if I don't work on myself, how am I supposed to help others, right? I miss my own blind spots. So writing this book, you start with a concept of what you are going to put in there, and then it changes, and then it changes again, and then it keeps changing.
Right.
So I have learned that it, even through this process, even more so, it's about creating the time to heal. And now is the healing time. So it's not putting it off, because there's a lot of times people are like, yeah, I've been wanting to do counseling for 5 years, 10 years.
Oh, I like that, because it's like everything we can put off indefinitely. But if we do something now, the action starts, and hopefully, the action leads to something good. I mean, the Bible says faith without corresponding action is dead. And so if I say I want something to change, I'm going to have to take some kind of action.
Yes.
Tell us, Rebecca, about, we could talk about some of the concepts in the book, but also I'd love to hear about, some of your work focus with your clients.
So I have clients who come with all different, situations that they're wanting to be different in life. So it might be, oftentimes it's they're feeling something in their body. So they're feeling, what they might describe as anxiety. They're having gut issues. They're having trouble sleeping, different things. So sometimes or a lot of times it is somatic that is showing up in their body. And that's when we start to really pay attention. It may have already been something that's in our thoughts, but we push it down, we're ignoring it.
Sure.
So it's really meaningful work to help someone understand that their body is trying to tell them something more than just, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I need to use the restroom. There's so much more. Like our body, it talks about in the Bible that our body is a temple. And what do we need to do with a temple? Like we go there to try to hear from God. We make sure that it's clean, that it's like all these things. So, and I'm we could go into like all of that, but seeing how our bodies are trying to tell us something is really helpful to get to the emotions, to get to the thoughts and beliefs that are keeping us stuck. And we're so afraid sometimes and unfortunately this was very prevalent in church, right? Like avoid the body, the body is bad, essentially. Even if they don't say it that way, there's kind of this like undercurrent message. Yeah. But I'm like, but God made our bodies. So why are we not listening to them?
I don't know if you've seen this, Rebecca, but one of the things I've found specifically, like with anxiety or stress, is is people fall into I've found a lot of people fall into categories of they carry it in their gut or they carry it in their chest, like that tightness in their chest,
Mm-hmm.
or they carry it in their head, like headaches and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an interesting part of that body phenomenon. As a matter
Mm-hmm.
of fact, if I'm working with something, some kind of trauma with people, a lot of times I'll have them focus on their hot spot, and it helps get us there quicker.
Yes.
So that really is fascinating. Tell us more about, I know a lot of, your work has been, helping people with like church trauma or difficulties from church. And we know, some of that can come from very rigid or strict and, legalistic, maybe kind of thinking we might call it. We talked a little bit about the body thing where, that could be a part of it, but tell us more about some of the things that you see coming out of churches that people may need to get untangled.
Mm. And so I'll speak to my experience growing up more
Okay.
like evangelical, because I know some people like they're all kinds, like they come from all different denominations. So
Sure.
I can't necessarily speak to all of those, but for myself and what I'm seeing in clients is what I'll just kind of touch on. So a lot of times it is, and I again I don't want to speak for everybody, but people are not often going in with this intention of bringing harm, right? They're going to church, they're
No.
seeking God, they're trying to understand things about their life. Maybe they're come to a crisis and they're like crying out to God, and then they found this church or group or whatever.
Hmm.
So they're oftentimes coming in with that attitude of seeking and knowing. But depending on their personality, if they are more like intellectual, they may grasp onto a concept that doesn't also explore the emotion or allow for emotions. It's like this. So it's like a spiritual
Sure.
bypassing is what
Sure.
I have found to be probably pretty consistent with a lot of faiths,
Hmm.
Christianity. Yeah. So specifically, I'm speak in my own experience. So
Sure. Sure.
yeah, one an article I read recently was really helpful for me because it was saying that growing up in evangelical churches, sometimes there's a gap in development because it's just like, oh, this is what you need to do. You just need to follow this path, and like that's
Hmm.
that's going to make your life really good. Essentially, yeah, you'll have
Hmm.
struggles, but it will
Hmm.
be like you do this, and then life will be good. And
Like you
for a
follow these
kid,
rules.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. And when you're a kid and you hear that, you're like, oh, why would I not want my life to be good? Sure, I'll
Sure.
do that. And then
Sure.
you're like, stuff happens, and you're like, wait, I thought my life was going to be good.
Right.
And what is good, right? And
Right.
that's a whole discussion. So there can be a lot developmentally where someone feels very young, or I like to say underdeveloped as well in some areas,
Hmm.
and you might be like overdeveloped in some ways. And so have how do you function in life when parts of you are overdeveloped and parts of you are underdeveloped? And so that's where I love doing the work with clients of that parenting themselves in that way.
That's so good. I find one of the ways that I will try to help my clients in that whole balance thing is just looking at your soul, which we understand is just one third of who we are. We're
Mm-hmm.
spirit, soul, and body as believers. But your soul is your mind, will, and emotion. And I teach people that any of those three can be idols in your life. In other words,
It's
you
good.
might grow up, let's just say, God bless any legalistic churches, but they have their list of rules and do this and don't do that, and so the mind and or the will becomes king. You have to
Yes.
have the
Well said.
willpower or you have to have the mind. But of course there's other ways that emotions can become king, like when you become a teenager, for example. But all three of these could be idols. They could be lifted up higher than they're intended to be because they're all gifts
Oh,
from
yes.
God. They're just not meant to take over, right? And so
Yeah,
that sounds like
that's a good
part of the
point.
work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that they all get a seat at the table, as one of my friends
Exactly. They get
says.
a seat. I love that.
Yes, because they all do. Like if we're made in God's image, then we
Yep.
don't need to be pushing one down. We need to look at all of it and be like, what is this trying to do in my life? What is this? How is God trying to help me understand him and other people and all of that, which is
And you
what
know
he
what
said,
I
right?
exactly, exactly. I tell people that just when you're talking about your emotions, they can be like children. We don't want them to take over the house, but we don't want to lock them in the basement either.
Definitely not.
You
No.
know what I mean? But honestly, the same way goes with your mind and your will. You could have grown up where you were called a dummy, or you thought you were slow, or you thought you were behind. And so your mind could be suppressed because you just believe that's the way it is. But keep going. I want to hear more of some of this work that you do and the way that you approach it.
That was really good points, and that's helpful for me, like sticking in that. But I'm like, yeah, that is true because it does feel like even, um, and won't go into it today necessarily, but like even marriage can be very much an idolized. Like if you look at the groups that are in church, I saw that facial expression. You're like, yes, you have a lot to say
Absolutely.
probably about that, but it's
Yeah.
idolized, and that can be so harmful to people because like even you look at the small groups in church, you have your categories, but it is this like oh, when the conversations start with like Disney movies, like your prince will come and save you, but it's
Sure.
like
Sure.
make sure that you aren't idolizing that, but you are putting God as the center. One thing I also like to tell clients is when you were younger, um, you automatically knew how to play. You had an
Mhm.
imagination. No one has to teach a child usually to play. They just automatically know how to do it. And not just in the play, but they like learning to experience their world and be curious and oftentimes compassionate. And we can remember that because sometimes people can get overwhelmed with like there's so much that I have to learn or do and all these things, and I'm like, yes, but like also Jesus says my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So do we
True.
believe him? And in what does that look like in our life? And can we remember? We can ask God to help us remember who we are, and removing actively, like you were saying at the beginning, like actively, like okay, looking at what is blocking me from remembering that, and how can I remove that and release that. And therapy can be one of those ways, but that way it doesn't have to feel so overwhelming. We're like, oh, we're remembering, so let's remove the layers so that we can remember those truths.
I love that. I love that. And for years, Rebecca, I have had this thought that when people come in to see me, um, we're looking for anything that's blocking a blessing.
Ooh,
And like what you
blessing.
said,
Okay.
we want to help people to be that child that God created you to be.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 18 says, unless you become like this little child, you can in no wise enter into the kingdom of heaven. And so I
Yes.
remember sitting with the Lord once and going, Lord, I don't know many people that are like little children. And what does
Yeah.
that mean? And I remember he dropped this in my spirit. He said, son, on every person's last breath, they will be totally dependent on me for their quote next breath. The question is, will you get there before your last breath?
Yeah, I use that all the time. Come to me as
Yes.
a little child, like
Yes.
that is pretty interesting when we think about how serious we are as adults. But
We are. We are.
I'm like, what? Yeah. So I'm a registered play therapist also, and I think some of that was
Okay.
honestly like because I also was a teacher. I worked with kids, and like just this fascination with how they can be so forgiving. They
Oh,
can be
yes.
so curious and the bounce back. Obviously trauma impacts their life, but when that isn't there, you see it. And how does a child come to me as a little child? Curiosity, lots of
Yes.
curiosity. And
Hmm.
it's okay to not know all the answers and not to get all the answers, so that's okay.
Yeah.
um, and compassion and
Oh,
just
yeah.
joy and play. So a big part of what I like to encourage clients to do and that I do in my own life is play. And play looks different for different people,
Yeah.
like expressive arts, riding horse, going on a walk and just noticing what you're seeing around you is all like
Hmm.
forms of play, right? A baby isn't like playing with toys, but at first, but we play peekaboo with him and they're having a great
Sure.
time.
How has trauma shaped your sense of time?
I would think the biggest one is feeling like there's a certain path that you're supposed to take and that we're told, right? Like, whether depending on the family, right? It might be like, well, you can only date at a certain time and you only date like
Mhm.
uh to marry somebody. It could be like the true love waits, purity culture. Those
Sure.
were all have good intentions, but they also have brought a lot of harm in
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
And so then that can be like, oh well, I'm doing it wrong, and then you're not
Mhm.
focused really on like, what is God telling you? Like, what is unique to you and your situation? And so you can feel like you're behind, you should be further along because, oh, you're not married in time, or, oh, you didn't have kids in time, or, oh, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
you're not a grandparent, like what's going on, or whatever it is. Like, and there's like also a rush to do something, a hurriedness, or oh, you fill your time with all these volunteer things, and then you're missing what needs to rest, maybe, or you're missing either it's time to rest, or you're missing what God is trying to speak to you, right? Slow down. And like, I think about the Psalm 23, and not just saying it, but like, if you really look at the words, like, wow, he's a shepherd and he makes
Yes.
me lie down in green
Yes.
pastures. He's like, you need to go rest. That's what you
You
need.
need a rest.
Oh,
You need a
okay.
break.
So that's not encouraged oftentimes. So
So a lot of
that's
what
kind
you're saying, Rebecca, is, the family pressures, the church pressures, even the cultural pressures to say, oh,
of,
you're
hmm,
supposed to do it this way. Like culturally, a lot of people in my age group or economic was like, oh, well, your kids have to go to college right after they do high school.
yes,
Well, all four of our kids took a gap year afterwards, and they all did
cool.
that. It gave them a little time to work, to get into the real world, and maybe figure out a little more about what they wanted to do. That worked out great for them. Now, you could make that a rule also, so we
I
don't
know.
want to necessarily go
You're going to
there,
have a gap year. I wish that
right?
I had known about a gap year, because that was like, oh, that would be so cool.
I
But
think
we can
there's a
give
lot of good
ourselves a gap
things.
year now.
But when
Sorry.
we talk about legalism, that's right. We could give ourselves a gap year this year, right? We could
And
somehow.
that's the thing
But
about time, if I may, like, just sometimes we're told, like, oh, you missed it, right? You didn't do it back then. And so I'm
right.
saying, and it was encouraged to me by Ed Rush, who is an author of God Talks, and
Oh,
my
cool.
business coach. And
Okay.
he has said,
Yeah.
asking God to restore, I think he says a thousandfold, or he says a
I
hundredfold. I
like
don't know,
it.
whatever he says, but I'm like, I'm going to say a thousandfold,
I
And so
like
I'm
it.
just like, so then you think about like, if you have that thought and you're looking for those opportunities too, like you're more
Mhm.
open to what God is saying, like, okay, like if that is,
Mhm.
something that, and then the cool thing is I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, you've already been doing that. So you actually knew that I was going to pray this. Essentially, is like, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
how all of that necessarily works, but I'm just like, oh, you already, of course he knows time all at the same time, but like, you already
Yes.
knew that I was going to pray that, and you've been doing that already. I'm like, what else could I be praying for and to have my heart in the right position that you've already been doing? So it's just it's blowing my mind, which is good, because less of my intellect is better at this moment and season in time, and like more trying to trust him in that way, to be led by
Absolutely.
my
I
higher
mean,
power.
you think about that. We talked about how your intellect, your mind, of course, can be an idol, and you might have been
Hmm,
trained that
hmm.
way. The Bible says, lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your paths.
Yes.
That doesn't say throw your understanding in the trash. It just says don't make it your main thing to depend on,
Yeah.
right? So many people depend on figuring it out, and then they end up worrying all the time, or they
Yes.
depend on, having enough willpower to do it,
Hmm.
right? And so, but I was thinking about shame. Really, a lot of what we're talking about is, this shame that goes with, oh, you didn't do it by this time, or you didn't finish
Yeah.
it this way, or you didn't finish. Oh my goodness, I've had so many people that have either started college or not went to college but not finished, that they're ashamed of it, And I'm like, man, God had a different path for you. Obviously, if it was still the right thing to do, you could go back and get your college degree, and some
Yep.
people do that. But whatever you do, we want you free of the shame, right?
Yes.
Because the
Yes.
shame says, I'm bad,
Yes.
right?
And
It's
that's not of
very
God.
different than I made a mistake. I could have made a mistake. Okay. Now
Mhm.
what do I do today with that?
Mhm. Yeah, because that's not of God, right? Like, there's
No,
no condemnation.
no,
So, like, what is that
no.
leading to the tree of life, or is that leading to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? So
I
that's
totally agree because Rebecca, when you think about it, our life choices are about agreeing with God or agreeing with the enemy. God clearly says there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There's no shame. He took the shame for us. But what is Satan called? The condemner of the brethren. So we're either agreeing with him with condemnation or we're agreeing with God with no condemnation. Of course, sometimes we have to work some things out.
yes.
Okay, I have
We're
to
humans.
accept forgiveness for this, or I have to go and say, hey, cousin, I am sorry this happened, or whatever. And we might need to make some things right. That'll help us to get free of that condemnation.
Yes, and I'm
But
going to
what are
say
some,
something with what you said, like, because I'm shifting my
yes,
language. It's such a natural thing, right? We learn from others, and we have these phrases that we say, like, I have to do this, I have to do that. So I'm trying
right,
to shift
right,
my own language, and I have it in my book too. I have a strike through where I'm saying I have to I get to. Not that everything is a get to, but I'm saying, like,
sure,
where it's like, hey, this
sure.
is actually an opportunity. What if we look at these things in our life as like, okay, is there something for me to learn here that's going to help me to grow?
Hmm.
And if I can look at it like that, rather than like how our society kind of says, like, you only be happy. Like, yes, of course, we all want to feel good, but like part of feeling good is sometimes even in the messy middle, right? You look at kids, they have food on their clothes, or your house is messy, and you're
Hmm.
just like, man, life is good because they're playing with toys, and you're just sitting back at that moment, and it could be chaos, but it's also like, this is good, this is life. And so, like, if we can look at, it doesn't mean in the moment we're going to see all those times, but the more that we are able to see, like, okay, I get to release that. And what do I get instead of that? That I've been holding on to this, and what am I going to get when I'm releasing that? What can I work towards to when I'm releasing that? And that can help shift a lot, rather than like, oh, I don't want to let it go. It's not good for you. It's really destroying you, right? Like you were saying, you're in gut issues, or like
Yes,
this lack of sleep and all kinds of things. Like, is it actually helping you? If it's not, what we don't need it. Let's get rid of it, you know?
that's so true. I mean, some of those phrases, I have to do this, I can't do this, um,
Limiting,
you
stuck.
know,
Hmm.
yeah, there's all that limiting stuff. Or if I have to do it, man, I feel like I'm in a cage or I'm in shackles, right? I'm
Yeah.
in chains. No, it's interesting. One of the things that comes to mind, Rebecca, is I think about when Jesus said those hard words that day. I tell people, he woke up to pray that morning, and the Father's like, okay, you got to say some hard words today. And Jesus is like, oh, today's the day, hun. So he goes out and he's got all these disciples, not just the 12, but many other disciples and followers. And he goes, well, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you cannot be my disciple. You can't follow me.
Hmm.
And most of the disciples left. And he turns to the 12 core and he says, are you going to leave too? I mean, they're just over the hill, they're just around the corner. You could still catch them.
Giving them permission.
He
Like, are
didn't
you
tell
sure
them
you
you
want to?
have to stay.
Yeah, that's true.
They got to choose. And he wanted to make it clear. Listen, I know these are hard words. God gives us hard words sometimes, and he gives us an invitation. You can take that now, or you might reject it now and maybe accept it later. A lot of those disciples that left definitely turned back and accepted it later when they understood it more fully. Oh, many had to be
Hmm.
sacrificed on the cross. I get it now. I thought
Hmm.
we had to be cannibals or something. um
Hmm.
but he gives us that choice, and that's one of the beautiful things. And when we talk about some of the things that that can hurt us from growing up, whether it can come from families or churches, a lot of it is the have tos and the shoulds, maybe the guilt trips and stuff like that, right?
Yes. Like, something you were saying about choice. He
Yeah.
gives us a choice, and that is such a a healthy thing, you know, like when we work with people who experience trauma, giving them a choice for like to even do the therapy or not to do the therapy that
Uh-huh.
particular session. Or but we can delve into like, hey, what's coming up for you that's blocking you from saying yes to this, you know,
Mhm.
and just whatever the block is that's right there, that's where we work, right? They're right where they need to be,
That's
and
exactly
that's
right.
work with where what is showing up. But yes, he gives choice. Jesus gave choice. He gave permission. Even when he healed people. He's like, "Do you want to be well?" You know?
Do you
Because their
want to?
whole life would be changed if they were so used to begging because
Yes.
they couldn't walk. Hey, your life's going to be
Yes.
different. Now you're going to have to like work and you've never done that before, and you know,
Mhm.
people relationships with people are going to be different. You know, like are you is this what you want? You know? And let
Yes, is
them
this
know.
what you want? Because Rebecca, you and I both know some people do get into that victim mentality, and that's one of the hardest things to shake.
I have definitely been guilty of that. I was, you know, like looking at it all. Or okay, so this is another church thing. It's not just.
Okay.
Wait, let me rewind. It's
Sure.
another thing
Sure.
that shows up in often in church in that perfectionism, like all or nothing. That like
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
have to do it this way or this way, rather than like, hey, what's you know, what's is there a middle space that, and not in an unhealthy way, but that works for me? You know, that
Mhm.
God is calling me to.
And I talked to people about the have to thoughts, like I have to do it this way, I can't do it that way. And you start to put your mind, through these gymnastics, and it really does kind of make you miserable.
Hmm. Yeah, there's not a, and then it shows up in relationships with each other.
Mhm.
And then it's like, well, why didn't you do that? Like you have these expectations for someone else, but that may not be what God is calling them to do. But you have this desire, maybe, or a wound, and so
Mhm.
that you're wanting something from someone because you should have gotten it developmentally, but you didn't, and that can be really difficult. And so then we can set these expectations on each other for something that keeps us stuck in shame, stuck in, you know, and not in like being able to follow what path that we are supposed to be on.
That's so good. I agree with you, Rebecca. And I will tell you, since we're talking about words like have to or can't,
Hmm.
one of the most common things that I'll find people is I call it can't believe itis.
Okay.
Like, I'll have a client come in and maybe I haven't seen her in a while. This actually happened once years ago. And I'll just tell you, briefly about it. But she had come in a few months before this particular session, and had went to see her family a few hours away. And we spent 45 minutes of our 50-minute session with, well, I can't believe mom did this. I can't believe sister did that. I can't believe. And I remember just listening a
Mm.
lot. She needed to just offload, like
Yes.
you said, meet them where they are.
Hmm.
A few months later, she had traveled again to see her family, and we were about 8 or 10 minutes into the session, and she was saying, "I can't believe" again. And I stopped her for a minute, and I'll call her Jane, like Jane Doe. I said, "Jane, hold on just a second. I remember this from our last session, and I've just got a simple question. What is it that's really actually impossible to believe about
Hmm.
your sister's behavior, your mom's behavior, your brother-in-law's behavior, etc.?" And she's an intelligent lady. She paused for a moment. She kind of goes, "Well, none of it's impossible to believe. It's just typical behavior."
Mm.
And so you think about it, what we do with that is we try to convince ourselves actually that we don't have to fully accept it. So we
Hmm.
don't have to fully face it. And so
Yeah.
if I can change some of that language, if I can change some language, maybe I can start moving towards grieving and accepting. And then maybe I have to set some boundaries. Maybe I'm required to do a few things differently,
Hmm.
because my default can be, oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Yes.
And that's just the other side of this of the coin, where I have to, if I can't believe it and I have to go do this with my family or whatever it is, you know where's the place for growth and hearing God and following his lead and still honoring my parents and my family, because I think we could do all of that.
Hmm. When you were saying that, it reminded me of one of the things that I wrote a little. I have a little note that I wrote here because I'm going to come back to it. But one thing my therapist said to me years ago when I kind of was at that place where I was just like, and this keeps happening, and this keeps happening, and she's like,
Right.
what if you and I say this when I want to preface to people that it may it may not be. I want everybody to be safe, right? I don't want someone to be
Sure.
in a situation. So
Sure.
what I'm about to say doesn't mean accept harm and unhealthy behavior. But
Hmm.
along the lines of what you're saying, accept the or acknowledging that people may have a pattern, and if it is a pattern of behavior,
Hmm.
knowing that that is how it usually is, and be pleasantly surprised when it's different. And at
It's
first,
good.
I was mad. I was like,
Yes. Yes.
"What?
Of
You
course.
want me to?" Oh, yeah.
That's part of
Okay.
the grieving
I'm
process, isn't it? Getting mad.
It it is, and that's a yes, and absolutely. So I'm like, okay, so I'm creating or I'm allowing myself to stay in a place of suffering because I want things to be different. There's nothing wrong with wanting things to be different
No.
necessarily. And if I'm stuck in that place, I can't change them. I can only change me. So how can I change? I can accept that this is how they probably always are. Pray for them to
Right.
be different. Pray for whatever they need. Um, right? Love your enemies. Love others as you love yourself. So that has helped me. And then the other thing with the all or nothing is what can be really harmful too, with that adds to the shame, is when people are like, when pride becomes a part of it. So like
Yes.
I'm just going to own. And I think if people aren't owning that, then, maybe they need to double check.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and it's not a fun thing to admit. And at the same time, it brings me to more of a place of peace and life when I can say, hey, rather than, like what it used to be is like self righteousness, they're bad,
Hmm.
I'm good.
Hmm.
Why, how am I not looking at the plank in my own eye?
I love that concept that you're talking about. And one of the things that I really try to think about a lot and share with my clients is there's a fascinating study of things in scripture where it says, be clothed with.
Mm,
And if you look at it, think about it simply. If the scripture says be clothed with something, it means put it on daily and always
that's a good
wear it.
point. Ooh, I like that.
Put it on daily and always wear it. One of the things we'll see it in First Peter 5, but I think in a few other places, be clothed with humility. It's not one and done. You're going to have to put it on every day. Every
Yeah.
occurrence, you're going to have to put on that humility and walk in that humility. And so, it is humbling to own things and to face things, especially with loved ones, even harder with yourself.
Hmm.
But the Lord's like, if you will own something, whether it's a pain you've been through or a pain within yourself, I'll meet you at that pain and I'll give you grace for it, because where sin abounds, grace abounds even more. So God meets
Yeah.
us at those places, whether it's internally in ourselves or something we're experiencing, even when we go back to visit our family or whatever it is.
Hmm. Yes. Well said. That's helpful.
This has been so good, Rebecca, and we're excited about your book. Are there any kind of closing thoughts that you might want to share with us? Or maybe there's one thing that you meant to cover, but we didn't cover. You're welcome to.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important for people to look at where in their lives they have shame around messages of time that maybe might come from other people rather than of God. And
It's
being
good.
willing to look at that and ask God, what is true about this? Like, how do you actually see this? And that's, yeah, so I would say that's the biggest thing. And so that's where that phrase time shame, I don't think is I don't think I wrote it in my book. I may add it because I'm still working on some final things, but that came from talking through some of this in my own life. So that's a really big thing that I'm working on. I do work with clients on in counseling, but also I'm adding therapeutic coaching because there's some people who there's kind of like these two groups of people who need extra support
Hmm.
outside of counseling, whether they have finished counseling and they're in counseling, or they are not able to go to counseling, or it just doesn't feel like they're ready for that, you know? And so there's
Sure.
this gap and that I'll get people calling from, and saying like, hey, I've been wanting to, go to counseling for a few years, but there's so many therapy modalities. So I don't want people to be overwhelmed with where
Sure.
to start. And so that's what I created. The coaching program came from the book of like, hey, how can the book be helpful to people? And then like, how do we support them from that? And it's to help fill in that gap so that they can get the support they need in the stage of life that they're in, which may not be being able to drive to therapy, which sometimes takes as long as the actual therapy session. So
Oh, sure it does.
with how much people have going on in their lives. So that is something that I offer as well. And that can be throughout, not just in Texas. So
That's great. I love that. Yeah, you can do coaching really connected to anywhere. Rebecca, tell us how to reach you. What's the best way for us to reach you? We're going to put it on the bottom of the podcast also, but how can we reach you?
probably the easiest is the website, and there is a form under contact me, I think it is, or contact us on the
Okay.
top right. But the website is Canvas, like a painting canvas, CANVASCW.com. And the C is for counseling, the W is for wellness.
Canvascw.com.
Yes.
That's a pretty short name. I think people could remember that. And then tell us one more time the book that we're hoping comes out in September. Tell us the title again.
Healing Time, Move into a Future of Freedom and Flow. And I have it right here next to me. It has the little thing. It
Oh,
says not
sure.
for resale, um,
Okay, okay.
because
I
of
love it. You've
going
already
through it.
got that first kind of
Yes.
first beta copy or whatever we call that.
Yes. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, like a proofed copy or something like that. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Rebecca, thank you so much for being
Thank you,
on
Mark.
with us. We pray that your ministry and counseling goes well and everything in your life goes well.
Thank you. I appreciate this very much, what you're doing and offering to people healing from different things in their life so that they can be who God has made them to be, and who they want to be.
You are so welcome. And God bless everyone listening to and watching this podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please do us a favor and like, subscribe, and share with others who might need it. And you can find additional resources at SamaritansWell.com.